All right, so we're up and running on the Facebook, Bri. Just waiting on you on the IG. Then we'll get up and we'll make this audio magic happen. Can you talk again? I want to make sure that everything's good. There you go. Okay. Just want to make sure you're good on the Zencaster, which is obviously the most important part of having a podcast is the audio. Believe it or not.
I think you're right. I'm not seeing anything on the gram.
No, you're not seeing
anything. It just shows black when I click on your video.
Well, it says, "Hang on." We're telling
there you go. Now I got you.
There you go. There we are. I don't believe I know you. No, but there you are. Name the movie.
No idea. Austin Powers.
Yeah.
I got that only from the voice, not the line. I have no idea what the line is.
I can't remember the line. Hey, Rob Rutt just chimed in. He'll know. What's the line, Rob Rutt, when he says, there you are. I don't believe I know you, but there you are. Rob Rutt.
From the first one?
Guy, I think the third one. We'll let him chime in.
That's a deep guy.
That's a deep guy. Yeah, he'll know. That guy knows everything about Austin Powers. I can't see your face, which may or may not be a good thing. Look at that. Patagonia hat. Never climbed a mountain in his life, folks.
It's cold. I've climbed many a mountain.
Is that a metaphor?
It's
for life?
Literal and metaphorical.
I wrote a dissertation. I climbed that mountain.
Yeah.
We're recording audio now, so we may have to keep this audio gold in there. Who's excited?
Cold open.
Oh, Brian, it's been a while since we did this show. Shall we get things going?
Yeah, a little rusty. Got to jump back into it.
A little rusty. The sports nerds are back. I'm Sam. He's Brian. I'm in Denver. He's in Michigan. It's Colorado and Michigan. That would be the correct comparison there. Let's make sure we have our ratios set up correctly. Dude, we're back, man. This is great. It's been a couple weeks. I know we had
sports going on too.
Lots.
This is the honey hole time of year for us. There's just all 4 sports are going on. Almost four sports.
Lots of sports.
Basketball next week.
No, there's a ton, man. There's a ton. It's kind of, to be quite honest, we are recording on Friday and then having the 2 or 3 days prior to this with no playoff baseball. It's been pretty painful. I don't know. We're going to jump into the division series talk here in a second. But wow, I missed baseball.
No, you're right. Like it's like you get those first 4 days of March Madness,
mm-hmm.
and then you don't get any basketball for like 4 days, and you're just shaking with withdrawals, and it's just like this sucks. Yeah, you love those 4 days, but then during the off days, you're like, man, they should spread this out a little bit.
Mm-hmm. No, 100% agree.
I thought the Red Sox played tonight, Friday night. Yesterday, I thought that, and then I realized I was off by a day, and I have to wait until tomorrow. And they play during the Wisconsin-Michigan game.
Oh, dude, that's gonna be tough for you. What are you gonna go with? You're gonna split screen it?
Yeah, I mean, I'll go back and forth, but I think my primary watch will be the baseball game. I'm look at the standings. How's Iowa doing?
We are 4-1, and so here's what I was going to ask you. Right? Do I root for Michigan tomorrow in hopes that Wisconsin loses and Iowa and Wisconsin are both 1-loss teams in the big right? Or do I hope that Wisconsin loses down the road and that loss to Wisconsin looks better? You know what I'm saying? Does that make sense?
I mean, I don't know your schedule well enough, but it seems to me
it's easy.
I was going to say that Iowa's path to a top 4 is only by winning the Big Ten.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it is.
Because that's where you're going to play some ranked teams.
Yep.
So by that logic, I think you want Wisconsin to lose in every situation.
The only ranked
team, you have to win the West to be in the Big Ten championship game, right?
Correct. Yeah, the only ranked team left would be Penn State, and so. That's actually the only game that Iowa will probably not be favored is Penn State.
Who'd they lose to?
Wisconsin.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Yeah. Two special teams fumbles didn't help the cause at all. So, all right, Bal, we should jump into today's episode. Before we do that, I want to recommend or suggest people follow us on Facebook. You can just go to facebook.com/sportsnerds. We're on Instagram. sports.nerds, and then Twitter @_sportsnerds. We're doing the live stream now on Instagram. So if you're listening to this show down the road, just know that if you follow us on Instagram, you'll get those notifications and you can see what Brian and I look like. So lucky you. Please leave us ratings on iTunes if you can do that, or Apple Podcasts, I guess, as it's called. We're on Anchor now. So if you wanted to throw us some dough, go for it. we would appreciate it. We have costs that need to be covered. We perhaps have a couple sponsors that are going to jump on board with the show, but we're going to finalize those deals hopefully in the next week. Otherwise, Brian, I don't know if folks can find us on YouTube. We appreciate your continued, listening, watching, all of that stuff. Tell your friends about us. I don't think I have anything else to add. Do you, in terms of pitching the show?
Well said.
All right, thanks, buddy. We're used to.
You got stuff you want us to talk about? Let us know.
Actually, yeah. I mean, we try to be smarter sports talk. I think we're getting there. The last few episodes have been, I think, our most popular. Actually,
when I've been gone, you mean?
No. You were part of it, right? It was our talk with Dan and Brendan, and people loved that.
That was fun.
That was great. And then our talk with John Peters of the SFIA, we gained a lot of listeners and a lot of subscribers just from that, because obviously the SFIA as the kind of trade organization for the sports and fitness industry, a big player. So it's glad to have those folks on board, and we hope that you'll continue listening. So today, Brian, let's do a quick rundown of what we're going to do in case people want to skip through the podcast and not necessarily want to hear one section, but they want to hear the others. We're going to open up with some Major League Baseball playoff talk. I think Brian crunched some numbers earlier this week. I crunched some numbers, some statistics that will allow us to talk and have a conversation about these, I guess, not so much the wild card games, but definitely the division series. So we want to get into that. Then we're going to go into a conversation about locker rooms and whether or not certain athletes are bad for locker rooms. We're going to try to take that from an affect theory angle. I'll guide the conversation and let Brian sound smart while he's adding to it. And then finish with the elephant in the room. There, Brian, I used the correct metaphor, the correct cliche, which is I don't like calling them rape allegations against Ronaldo. I think the evidence kind of proves that he is definitely a sexual assaulter. And we're going to discuss that through the lens of how we make sense of athletes who are superstars but do really, really terrible things. So perhaps athletes that are shitty people, I think, is probably the best way to frame that. Does that sound good to you, Brian Schrader?
There are quite a few of them.
A lot. Rob Rutt asked, is firing Chili Davis the right move? Yeah, Rob. The Cubs were completely inconsistent this year. It was very frustrating. Terrible. Hey, Brian, move your iPad down a little bit on Be Live, because I can't. I can see the artwork in the top of your hat.
Oh, on my end, I can see my full frame.
No, on your for the Be Live, not your Zencaster, or sorry, your Instagram's fine. There you go. You are cold, man. I just noticed you got a flannel on. Gee, man, it's gonna
40 degrees outside.
It's gonna snow 2 inches here on Sunday, it says.
Dude, it's 40 degrees out right now. 2 days ago, it was 85 with like 85% humidity.
Dude, damn.
Weird weather. Weather's weird.
Well,
weather is crazy.
Climate change is a Chinese hoax, FYI. Or as let's go back to our rhetorical background. Ted Cruz framed it as a religion. Climate change science is a religion. So there you go. Now you're learning, folks. Obviously,
I honestly don't even know what that means.
Yeah, nobody does. It's Ted Cruz, right? Uncle Ted.
Did he really say that?
He did. I believe he did say that. All right, let's jump into it. I'll start off with my statistic here. Let's see. Between the ALDS and the NLDS, we had, what did I say? 2 wins. We had 2 wins. One win.
Braves had 1 win.
Braves had 1 win.
Yankees Yankees.
No, do we have 3 wins? Yeah, that's right. No, that's right. You're right, because Cleveland got swept. Yeah, so we had 2 wins.
And 2-3-1 sweeps.
So we had 2 wins within the 2 division series. That was the first time since 2014 that has happened, 2 or less. And then I believe, right, only the second time in the last 15 years that we've had 2 or less wins in a division series. The other one coming in 2009 when the Rockies took 1 game from the Philadelphia Phillies. 2009 was when the Phillies won the World Series, I believe. Right, Brian?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I guess the reason why I didn't say that, and I think you punched some numbers in terms of scoring per game. It was just a boring division series. It was really hard to watch playoff baseball over the last 5 to 7 days.
Well, I mean, individually inside of each game, there were moments that were pretty interesting, right? There were points when those games were close. But overall, right, and this is just sort of back of the napkin math, but there were only 30 runs scored in the division series by the losing teams, by all 4 losing teams collectively over 14 games, which means they averaged 2.14 runs per game, which is insanely low. You wouldn't, I mean, to a passing fan, maybe that doesn't seem all that low, but if you went and looked at average runs scored across the year, the lowest team in baseball was over 3, I believe.
Wow, that's pretty significant. Wow. Okay.
And like you may be thinking to yourself, well, that's a stupid observation because obviously the losing teams must not have scored very many runs if they only won 2 games over the course of 4 series. And that's true, right? Like those two things obviously go hand in hand, and there's a relationship, a correlation between those two things. But it also speaks to the broader, like 2 of those Rockies games were unwatchable.
They were terrible.
Right? 2 of those Dodgers games were unwatchable.
Mm-hmm.
The Red Sox took it to the Yankees in one game, 16-1. That was, I mean, that game. That's one of those moments that was kind of fun to watch from a fan perspective, or if you like to see offense, it was fun to watch. But I think the point here is not that like individual moments weren't fun or interesting. You almost always get that, but the series as a whole, they were over really quickly. There was not a lot of high drama moments. For me, the scariest moment, and again, I'm a Red Sox fan, was at the end of Game 4 of that Red Sox-Yankee series when the Yankees made it 4-3, and it looked like they might force a Game 5, right? But I mean, that's not high playoff drama. If you're worried that there might be an extra game of a series, usually you're cheering for that.
I'm gonna predict, or I guess I don't want to predict, but I'm gonna make an assumption. I'm gonna have a hypothesis. That's a better term for why these were terrible. And I think, and this is why I asked you to crunch numbers long term, because I'm very interested in it. And then I actually messaged Sean Foreman on Twitter, who's the president of Baseball Reference, because they have not produced the algorithm yet to basically tell us, they haven't produced the statistic, right, to tell us runs by playoff series over history. That's what I'm most concerned with. I don't care.
Is he going to name that stat after us if they start?
I don't know. Hopefully, right? That would be great.
Sports nerd stat.
Sports
nerd
stat. But
their website could be called Sports Nerds.
I want to see the data to back this hypothesis up. But I think as the launch angle and as more efficient hitting, I want to say efficient. Is that the right term? As hitting that produces runs, whatever you want to call that, becomes more popular. So hitting 4 home runs, hitting with a launch angle that is increased, continues to grow. I think we're going to see a continued disparity in these playoff series between those teams that play that kind of baseball and those teams that have just good pitching, because pitching has always dominated in the playoffs. It tends to always dominate in the playoffs, even now. And I think you're going to see why pitching matters way, way more when you get into these series where you have teams that can't hit for contact when they need to. They can't play small ball when they need to, because I do think that in the playoffs, and you and I have talked about this, money ball kind of proved that small ball in the playoffs, you kind of have to know how to play it. You really, really do.
Yeah.
And it's funny because as a Cubs fan, Joe Madden's really inability to play small ball well has, almost cost the Cubs a World Series, I would argue. And I think that's why people are really on Joe Madden right now for not having a successful playoff run this year. On the flip side of that, I think that's why you see managers like Tony La Russa, who have oftentimes just kind of barely gotten into the playoffs or not necessarily dominated their division, but still gotten in there, win so many World Series, because the guy knows how to play situational baseball in the playoffs. And so I guess what I'm trying to say is, to me, these division series are just they're magnifying the disparity between good pitching and the kind of hitting that is being celebrated in today's game. Do you think that makes sense?
No, it makes total sense. And baseball is a really funky sport, because I think more so than any other sport, what happens in the postseason is so drastically different from what happens in the regular season. NBA basketball is pretty much the same in the playoffs, right? Football, NFL football is pretty much the same in the playoffs. You're seeing the same people, you're seeing the same styles, you're seeing, the same personnel, all that sort of stuff. In baseball, all of a sudden you've got, most baseball teams now carry far more pitchers in their bullpen than they used to. And during the course of a regular season, you see all these guys, all these different pitchers that you might use for different reasons, right? In the regular season, it's more about protecting your rotation. It's about not burning through your important relievers and that sort of stuff. And then you get to the playoffs, and all these relievers that would normally you would see during the regular season, sometimes they don't even make a roster. You know what I mean? Because you're never going to pitch those dudes. In a regular season, the logic of most managers is, yeah, we want to get a win if we can, but we also want to minimize the effect that losses have on our team, right? That's why you'll play the B team, once every 6 days, or you'll have no problem sending out a long reliever to say, we're losing this game, we don't want to burn out a pitcher, that sort of thing. In the playoffs, you're going to send out the same, 2 or 3 relievers over and over again in every situation, and you're not going to pull out any of these relievers you saw in the regular season unless it's obviously a losing situation. But most managers are unwilling to admit that there is a losing situation in playoff baseball. A really good example of this, I think Terry Francona was sort of a leader on this mentality, and we've seen it a little bit in the regular season, pulling starters not out of the rotation, but using starters who are in your rotation in relief roles, right? So just 2 quick examples. The Red Sox in game 1 of the division series pitch Rick Porcello, right, out of the bullpen, as opposed to going to the, myriad dudes that they used during the regular season off the bench. And he was supposed to start game 2 or game 3.
What's interesting about that too is I think it's actually a really, really efficient approach to coaching, because you and I were talking the other night with that game 3 or 4 for the Red Sox, I guess game 4, when they put out Chris Sale. That's also going to be a dude's bullpen day, right? So he needs to be throwing anyhow. He needs to be throwing X amount of pitches, and you're also going to get value from that. If he's not just doing it in the bullpen, you're going to get outs. And I think
but he was supposed to pitch game 5.
He still could have, couldn't he? I mean, you would have had a day off.
It would have been a day off, but that's still pretty crazy.
I'm sure his leash was pretty short, though. I mean, he probably needed to throw, 20 pitches?
They basically said if a base runner got on, he was going to get yanked.
Yeah. I mean, he needs to. That's what these guys do, right? You have to go and you have to keep your arm fresh, and you got to throw a few balls in the pen, and that's what they were trying to do. And I mean, I like that approach. I think what's interesting, and this is the one thing to me that could keep the Dodgers from getting in the World Series, is if Craig Counsell takes that approach that he did. I can't remember which game it was against. Was it the Rockies or the Cubs? No, it was against the Rockies to start your relievers, right? To take that one game. I think
I thought that was a crazy idea. It worked.
It worked, right? They ended up obviously went into extra innings. It was game 1 with the Rockies. They went into extra innings, and that's when, right? Starting your reliever becomes a little problematic because you don't really necessarily have those arms. But to me, right, I think what has been proven, and you and I have talked about this. We talked about this with Sean. It's been proven that approach to baseball is really, really smart. Having guys that go 2 or 3 innings throughout the course of a ball game. It's just that these teams aren't built that way yet, and so I wonder if we see a shift towards less starting pitching, unless you have somebody like a Kershaw or a Scherzer who are going to dominate and be able to give you 8 or 9 innings all the time, or whether we're going to see teams built around a bullpen full of guys that throw 3 or 4 innings. It'd be interesting.
Hey, I lost you on Zen.
Okay. Let's see here.
We're not recording. Time out for a technical break.
Shoot. Well, I guess what? Hey, can you click the link again to Zencastr, because I'm good to go. So jump out of Zencastr and then click the link again. Okay, we should be all right. No matter what, we'll have your audio from either the video or
the first half.
We'll be okay. Be able to put
dude, I actually deleted that link. Hold on.
Can you hear me okay?
I can't hear you over Zen at all. I can hear you through.
Okay, because you're not on Zencastr. All right. Do you want me to resend the link? Everybody who's watching us live, this is how the sausage gets made. Who knew?
Yeah. I'm surprised it's the first time this has ever happened.
I know. I wonder what's going on. It could be a Zencastr issue today. Maybe they'll give us a free month of Zencastr.
Hey, what's up, then?
Because it happened earlier, too. Brian, let's see. Okay. All right, I just sent you the new.
Actually, I think I found it.
There you go. Okay, now you're back.
Oh, hey, we're back.
Hey, okay, so I just wondered.
Hold on, really quick. You got like alarms down at the bottom. Is that okay?
Alarms down at the bottom?
The track recording on mine. It says
I'm seeing your audio, so you're
triangle with an exclamation point.
Well, it's recording your audio, so I think we're okay.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
So what do you mean? Second recording.
I know we got to move on to the next topic, but do you have any comments to close that up regarding?
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't hear very well the last stuff that you were saying, but I think my point was a little bit like it's. I started with the idea that playoff baseball looks radically different, and that might explain the success and failures of different styles, like you mentioned before. If you're facing, the opposition's very best pitchers, you probably do have to your point, be willing to be more creative, go first to third, bunt situationally, move runners over, try and score in any situation that you can. Try, sort of mortgaging your future by trying to get one run out of an inning is better than one better than three kind of a philosophy. But I think the pitching has something to do with it. I think it might explain, at least in part, why the scoring is low. But it's definitely something interesting about the difference between playoff baseball and between regular season baseball. And when you compare that to other sports, it's pretty striking.
What's going to be interesting is if let's conjecture here and say that Houston and Milwaukee make the World Series. Major League Baseball does not want that, right? That's going to be.
I don't think so.
Unbelievable. I don't want to say boring. It might be boring. It might not be boring for baseball fans, but in terms of reaching big markets, that could be terrible.
I just don't feel like Milwaukee's that good.
Well, you and I have talked about that.
I don't mean that in a meme. I guess they're all right.
No,
maybe I'm wrong.
But I mean, look at their. They've
won 11 games in a row.
They're going to regress to the mean.
Some hotness going on there.
Mm-hmm. For sure, and I think there are enough games left that to me, right, they have to regress to the mean. And man, you go. Is it going to be Ryu, Kershaw, and Walker? Like Bueller had his explosion against the Braves and then shut him down, right? Like he gave him a grand slam, shut him down, and the Dodgers came back and they lost it, in the later innings. But dude, that's the one team to me that could beat the Red Sox or the Astros.
The Dodgers?
Yeah, the Dodgers.
Yeah.
I mean, Milwaukee doesn't. They wouldn't stand a chance in hell. But all right, next topic. I wanted to discuss this a little bit because last night I was watching a little bit of that Thursday night football game, and Odell Beckham Jr. walked out. This is after on Sunday he gave an interview with Lil Wayne. I don't know if did you catch that interview with Lil Wayne?
I did not catch the Lil Wayne interview.
Yeah, I did a little Lil Wayne interview on ESPN with some ESPN talking head. I can't remember who it was, and he talked about the climate in New York and the team situation and yada 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 and Eli Manning, all this stuff. And then last night he walked off in the middle of an offensive series. He went out of the locker room. And I wanted to discuss this because I was wondering, all right, is there something to the idea that a guy can bring toxicity to the locker room and make it a bad locker room? And as opposed to just being a frame or a sense-making tool that we use to say, oh, that guy's just a bad dude, he's toxic. Do you think that there's an actual physicality to it? Do you think that it actually sucks the energy out of guys when a dude like that shows up into the locker room?
I mean, I can only speculate what that might be like on a professional level, but yeah, I mean, almost for sure that happens. And I mean, I think the easiest way to think about it is, have you ever worked somewhere where you had something like that in your workplace? You know what I mean? Where the energy that they brought was negative, right? And when you were around them, you felt, infected by their outlook, right? And there's a variety of ways that you could be that negative personality in a workplace, and I assume likewise there's a variety of ways that you can do it in a clubhouse, right? But how could it not destroy the motivation of a team to see your franchise player, your star player, storming off with a little bit of time on the clock in the first half, or coming back on the field late, and that sort of stuff? If what you're looking for as a team is sort of a unified front and a display of team unity and strength and all that sort of stuff, yeah, a person in the clubhouse who's not taking stuff seriously matters a ton. And I don't want to make this the Brian Talk About the Red Sox podcast, but another good example of this is, it wasn't that long ago when the Red Sox had like a 11 game lead in the AL East This was the last season under Terry Francona, and apparently the clubhouse was just destroyed. There was, infighting in the clubhouse. There were guys infamously drinking beer during games and eating fried chicken, et cetera, et cetera. And that's a team that imploded. And basically everyone on the team was like, yeah, it's a good thing we didn't make the playoffs because we weren't getting along and we weren't going to play well. Fast forward to 2018, and you're having players say of Alex Cora, yeah, he's great. I love playing for him. It's fantastic he got sent here. He's a guy who's very interested in making sure people have fun in the clubhouse. And listen, you'll know this as a Cubs fan. Joe Madden has this reputation, right? When he was at Tampa Bay, he was the one who came up with the let's have themes for when we travel, and everyone will dress up according to those themes. That's all about keeping a clubhouse, sort of close and tight and having a good team culture, because those guys understand that that's as important to winning as is, the talent that you have on the field. If people aren't, excited about being there and they're not driven to win, if they're thinking about it more like a person who hates their job and it's just a paycheck, then yeah, that's probably going to affect the bottom line.
Dude, you're killing
the only other flip side of this that I would say is, I guess Odell Beckham might say, I was trying to get people fired up. I was pissed off and I was trying to, get them into it. And that was just me demonstrating my frustration, that it wasn't me being a bad teammate. It was me being upset that we weren't playing to our best, but I don't think that's the way that you should do it.
Dude, you're killing it. You nailed it. Right. That's what I wanted to get into. I want to go back just a second for those who are, gonna be in. Let's inform our perspective a little bit on this. And so Brian and I, our dissertation advisor and good friend Darren Hicks, he uses a lot of affect and affect theory in his work, and he talks about how emotion or words get used to basically make sense of our body's experiences, our feelings, and usually those words are called emotions. But there's definitely an understanding across various disciplines in academia, right? Psychology, communications, philosophy, but also neuroscience, right? You get into the hard sciences that say that, our bodies actually experience situations in ways that we don't necessarily have the words to explain. And so things like hormones, or when we smell somebody's smell and pheromones, are imbibed or taken in, that actually changes the kind of energy level of our body. And that can obviously have an effect on how we feel and how we think. And so affect theory tries to get into this. It's funny because this is in communication studies, it's like a 7-8-year-old turn. But whereas affect theory has been around for 20, 25 years, it gets used a lot in digital media studies. It gets used a lot in, quite frankly, in computer coding. Folks at Google and Facebook understand how language and how symbols and all this stuff can be used to influence people, right? And to kind of change their perception on things. But okay, hold on one second. We just lost it. Again, dang it. We keep losing everything, dude. Zencaster isn't working.
Dude.
I know. That's a problem. Okay, so
you're going to put these tracks back together.
I'm going to have to try to put it back together. We'll see. I'll piece it together. It's going to be a long afternoon. But okay, so the idea is, right, that something or somebody can actually influence the feeling of an environment based on words, based on energy, based on lighting, all of this stuff. And so as Brian was kind of pointing out, I think we can probably break down the physicality of the body, actual biological processes, and show that when somebody like an Odell Beckham or a Richie Cognito come into a locker room as very problematic figures, they can literally suck the energy level out of people, right? And think about it work, as Brian said. We go to a lot of faculty meetings. We go to a lot of meetings in general. Somebody who, has a Debbie Downer, right? A Debbie Downer in the workplace is going to suck the life out of people in the middle of meetings. And I think that's a real thing that exists. And so it would be interesting to kind of turn the lens that Brian and I have used and I've used that Darren uses that Brian is aware of on sports, because I think your point about coaches is spot on. I think your point that coaches can kind of try to interject positive affect or at least turn away the negative affect in a given situation, short-term and long-term, is really what makes them extremely valuable. And so when you point out about Joe Madden, what he brings to the table, I 100% agree. It would be nice to apply some of these tools that we have in neuroscience and psychology to communication studies to understand, right, do his words, does his rhetoric have this effect, or is there something else going on, or is it both? I guess I'm very interested in this.
Yeah, and I mean, you could take this past Odell Beckham as well. I mean, how many people have been accused of being, a term I'm not a big fan of, but a cancer in the clubhouse, or
Mhm.
being a distraction and that sort of stuff. I mean, I think it's also probably important to recognize at least the possibility that there's a racialized aspect to this, right? That we're potentially more likely to code people of color as bad teammates, or as disruptive, or as distractions, or whatever. I mean, the same language that's being
Mhm.
used to describe Odell Beckham is the way that we talked about Terrell Owens, is the way that we talked about, just add people in, right? So I don't know. It's weird because I kind of agree. That's not what I want out of a teammate, and that's not my vision for what a leader is. Right? That's not a good way to, I think, motivate your team if that's what it is that you're trying to do. At the same time, and this kind of circles back to the Serena conversation that we had a couple weeks back, sort of telling people how they should feel and telling people how they should react is sort of a dubious proposition at points, right? So I don't know. The NFL I think is bad about this because it tries to fuck, dude.
The NFL likes to do what, buddy? Sorry, continue.
Technical difficulty. Sorry. What was I saying? No, the NFL. It tends to always want to legislate this stuff,
Hmm.
right? Don't the TO stuff, right? He's only interested about himself. If you remember, Terrell Owens was famous for pulling a Sharpie out of his pocket and signing a football as a touchdown celebration,
Hmm.
or he had a cell phone tucked into the pad around the upright, and he dialed somebody. And so the NFL's reaction to this was, the public's reaction, or at least a large portion of the public's reaction was, he's only out there for himself. He's a showboat. He's not a team player. He's not doing this to celebrate his team's wins, but only his accomplishments. And then the NFL comes and says, we're going to put all these rules on how you celebrate, or whatever, right? Does that make sense? Odell Beckham storms off the field. It would be conceivable for the NFL to be like, it's a personal foul to leave the playing field if you're not injured or something, to try and legislate this stuff. I don't know. To me, my preference would be that it's something that's handled kind of internally. Like for me, what needs to happen for the New York Giants is they need to have a player only meeting or something, and get together and sort of say, hey, what are we doing here? What are our goals? What sort of image do we want to project? Right. So I don't know. I'm split on this. I both am not really down for kind of what Odell did. I don't think you leave your team out there when the game is still going on, but I'm also reluctant to take too big of a swipe and say this is how you ought behave.
What's interesting too is, as you were saying that, um, those the argument that you're going to do something like that outlandish in order to motivate your team, I think that only works if your team finds that rhetor to be authentic, right? There has to be an ethos or credibility aspect to that. And so somebody with a history like Odell Beckham, or even, again, if we want to take race out of it, but I know you're spot on also about how we framed this. But I mean, some dude who's never been a leader, all of a sudden, giving some speech at halftime in order to motivate the team, that's going to come across as extremely inauthentic and totally ineffective. And so I think that's a really good assessment.
Yeah.
It's funny, the Jimmy Butler thing also that's going on right now in Minnesota. It's the same kind of situation. Can we make sense of this in a way that brings race back into the conversation? I think it's, the thing, this is where language comes in. There's the actual thing that happens, right? There's the actual, phenomenon. There's the growing and decreasing of energy, of a positive energy, right? As feeling motivated or unmotivated. And then we make sense of it in very racialized terms. So I think that's the difference. It's not so much that African-American athletes suck the life out of the room. That's not what we're saying. But I think when we make sense of this kind of situation, how we make sense of it tends to be loaded up with biased terms, right? Whether it be race, gender, class, what have you, some sort of power dynamic. Is that a pretty good assessment, you think?
Yeah. No,
Saying
that
it that
sounds
way?
right.
Okay. All right, perfect. Do you before we wrap up, because I don't think we're gonna get the Ronaldo thing, and also if the audio is bad, I'm a little worried about kind of editing it all together so we can return to that conversation one of these days when we're feeling good about it. See, you just cut out again, so I'll let you jump back in. But as I'm kind of explaining myself here, I wanted to hopefully Brian will get back on the show and be able to answer this. But I'm wondering if the brilliance or the success that Bill Belichick has had is, hold on, now we're going to have to do it again. Darn it. Okay, I'm going to hit start. Here we go. It's terrible. I'm wondering if the success that Bill Belichick, oh, come on now. Oh, shoot. All right, there we go. No, I know, this is bad. I'm wondering if the success that Belichick has had is really his ability, obviously, to game plan, and I think that's a big part of it, but he's willing to take on these very problematic figures, people who have been, as you had hated to say, cancers in the locker room, and made them extremely successful in that New England system. Like, there has to be something about the coach and the system that the coach sets up that is able to counter the negative affective energy that these individuals can bring to the locker room. And in this case, right, I think it's been known that, Wes Welker was kind of a turd, and Edelman is kind of a turd, and even Tom Brady is very much a prima donna. But yet Belichick has been able to handle all of this.
Rules don't apply to the Patriots. If you try and apply things that we know to be generally true to the Patriots, it's just logic ceases to exist 30 miles in a 30-mile radius around Foxborough, unfortunately. It's true. He's not a player's coach, right?
Mm-hmm.
Belichick? I mean, this goes to your example. He's not. He's one of those coaches that has a reputation for you're there for 4 or 5 years and everybody fucking hates you, and then you leave, right? That's Jim Harbaugh. That's John Gruden. That you go in, you fire people, you don't give a shit what your players think. Those coaches don't have a long lifespan. Yet Bill Belichick has managed to.
Mm-hmm.
Well, part of that though is if there's someone in his clubhouse that's doing something he doesn't like, he probably sends them packing like that.
Just like that, right? I mean, I think that's part of. Man, it would be so cool to have access to the actual interviews or the sit-down conversations, the meeting he has with like a Corey Dillon or a Randy Moss or Shadow Josinko tried to go there. Who's the problematic?
But the difference is Randy Moss goes there and loved Bill Belichick. And
but here's the thing.
I think he just stepped in line.
No, but that's what I'm saying, right? I want to be in on the meeting,
like the before conversation,
right? Like when Josh Gordon, right? Who is it? Josh Gordon from the Browns, who is now with the Patriots.
Yeah,
is that who it is? Like you come there has to be a meeting. Like, does Belichick say, "Look, I can make you awesome, but you have to buy in and you have to stop being a shithead"? Like, I wonder if that would be a really, really cool.
Yeah.
Yes. And like you said, like Moss was, dude. I would argue Bill Belichick, like man, this sounds terrible because it's very racist, but like he took Moss to the next level, not just as a player, but in terms of maturity, right? Like as a professional. It's like Randy Moss is now on ESPN, right? As a very insightful commentator on the NFL. Like, it's crazy.
He had a career resurgence in New England that's hard to explain as being anything other than Bill Belichick. It really is. And you're right. The counterexample is Ocho Cinco, who didn't even play a game, right?
Nope.
He left it. He was like, the system's too complicated. The book is, got way too many plays in it, and I'm not a good fit there.
Yep.
And I always thought that excuse of his was more of an excuse. I think what he was like, I'm not going to fit in. This is not a team for big personalities.
Mm-hmm. You're right. Absolutely.
Which makes you wonder how Gronk manages.
He's not.
He's just a lovable lughead.
Yeah,
they're okay with it.
He's a different kind of personality. He's not like a harmful personality. He's not a toxic personality. He's just kind of an oaf, right? And I think there's something. He's a goof. He's a goof. But hey, we're gonna wrap this up because who knows?
Who knows what we got?
Who knows what we got? Hopefully, it turns into something. We'll find some audio to piece together. Brian, appreciate you taking the time today, old buddy. As always, we'll do this again next week. We'll have to figure out our technical difficulties. As always, folks, you can find us.
I'm in Denver next Friday.
For what?
Debate.
Well, I guess we'll have to record in person now, aren't we? Won't we? When do you get here? Okay, Zencaster crashed. I'm still recording. I'll take your audio there. Brian, don't say a darn thing. Buddy, it was good to see you, and you have a fantastic afternoon. See ya. Okay.
Is it still on Facebook?
Here, Brian, don't shut your video off yet. There, I can hear you.
Yeah. Are you